array.reverse looks simple, right? So basically whatever the array is, the index is reversed. So the last item becomes the first item becomes the last item. Do not confuse it with sort, okay? So for example, if this is the array, so in this array, this is the first item, right? Abhay is the first item, Rahul is the last item. So when I reverse it, then it becomes the opposite. Rahul becomes the first item, Abhay becomes the last item, and similarly, the entire array is reversed. Okay, so if the index was, say, 0, 1, 2, 3, so after reverse, what will happen? It will become 3, it will become 2, it will become 1, it will become 0. As simple as that. Okay, so this is array.reverse. Split and join. Now they have given, actually this documentation is really awesome, friends. If you master everything, most of the things that are there in javascript.info, it can be like a very good revision of everything that you have learned in this course. It's a very, very good note, very high quality notes. So here's the situation from real life. We are writing a messaging app and the person enters a comma delimited list of receivers: John, Pete and Mary. But for us, an array of names would be much more comfortable than a single string, right? So how to get that? So the input that we receive is a string which is comma separated, but we want to convert this into an array. To make it really simple, let str, any string, is equal to John, Mary and Pete. Okay, from this, suppose I want to loop over all of them, but I need an array of each item separated by comma. How would I do that? So that is the question here. So for that we have string dot split. Okay, so it splits the string into an array by the given delimiter. So if we have a comma separated thing and we invoke dot split on it, then we get an array back. Let me show you a couple of examples so it's very, very clear to you. So let array is equal to, or let me do it directly in the console. Let me run it, clear the console. I'll just make sure that string is a string, then I do split. And what do I need in order to split them? So I want to split them using the delimiter comma and a space. So a comma and a space. What would I get back? I would get back an array, right? So what would happen if I just split it by comma? Still the same result, but the space is also included in the name. So what it did is, anything before the first comma became the first item, after the first comma became the second item, and after the comma became the third item. Okay, and this can be used for anything. Suppose our string looks something like this. Okay, we can do the exact same thing here. We can put a semicolon in the delimiter and we get back the array. Okay. If it is something like this, then just a very silly example. Let's see if it works. So split space 1 space. Okay. And when I run it, I get my array back. Okay. So I hope this concept is very clear to you. Now, the split method has an optional second numeric argument. So you see, apart from delimiter, we have one numeric argument, a limit on the array length. So if this is provided, the extra elements are ignored. Okay. So it's simple, like there were 4 strings, but since the limit is 2, I just get back an item of 2 arrays. Split with an empty string would split the string into an array of letter. Again, you know, this is asked a bit, right? So what I want each letter here. Okay. So what can I do is string dot split, and then the empty string, and what I get back is each letter including the empty spaces. See? So this can be handy and useful at times. Similarly, we have like string has string dot split, array has array dot join, right? And it does this reverse of split. It creates a string by joining the items of the array by glue in between them. Let me show you an example in that way. It will make a bit more sense to you. So it's the other way. So instead of string, we have an array. So we have an array, John, Pete, Mary. Okay. Now I want to join them into a string, and they should be joined something like this. So what I need is John, then maybe 2 dashes, then Pete, and then 2 dashes, and then Mary. Okay, so how do we do this? Really simple. We do array dot join, and the glue here would be 2 dashes, and we have John, Pete, Mary. And this glue can literally be anything. So it can be a space, it can be slash, it can be pipe, it can be anything. Okay, so array dot join and string dot split. Reduce is most general purpose of array methods. Okay, so we can iterate over an array and give it, you know, any shape. And when we look into an example, it will make a little bit more sense to you. So let's look at the definition first, and then we'll move to or maybe let's look at the definition and then move to some examples which will make it very, very clear to you. So when we need to iterate over an array, we use for each, for of, etc. Right? When we need to iterate and return the data for each element, we use map. For one-on-one mapping, we use map. The methods array.reduce and array.reduceWrite also belong to that map category, but it's a little bit different. So they are used to calculate a single value out of array, and that single value can be anything. It can be a new array, it can be an object, it can be a number, it can be of any shape basically. Okay. So this line actually beautifully explains what happens. So the function is applied to all array elements one after another and carries on its result to the next call. Okay, so this carry on things happens. How does this happen? So first let's look at the syntax. So array.reduce takes in a callback function, first argument, and second argument is the initial value, a callback function and an initial value. This is also called as reducer function. Okay. This function has access to accumulator and the current item and index in array. So most important for us are accumulator and the current item. Okay. So if let's look at an example that will make a lot more sense. So say you have this particular array, okay, and this is an array of objects. This object has 3 items, right? Sorry, this is an array of 3 objects. So you have 3 items, 1, 2, 3, array of objects. We call reduce method on it. It takes in a callback function and an initial value. The callback function gets access to the accumulator or the previous value, we can name it anything, and the current value or the item for each iteration. Okay. And usually for the initial value, we give it the shape of the end result that we want to. So in this example that I've written for you, the array looks something like this. Okay, it's an array of objects and each object is information about a developer. So we have their first name, last name and their department. But the end result that we want is a single object. And we have the department name BE as a key and all the developers first name who are from the BE department. And in all the developers which are in FE department goes to the FE. So single object, 2 properties, backend and frontend. Backend contains an array of all the first name of all the engineers who are from the backend department. The FE property contains an array of all the first name of all the developers who are from the front-end department. So this shape is usually, so this initial shape is usually what we give. Okay. So we have BE, FE, which are empty arrays. Okay. So in the first iteration, the previous or the accumulator is the initial value itself. And from the second iteration, whatever we returned inside the callback function in the previous iteration becomes our previous or accumulator value. Okay. So in the first iteration, what would be the previous? So this callback function gives us access to 2 values, 2 important values, current and previous. Current is simple, the current item, right? So this current means this current object. But what does this previous mean in the first iteration? It's the initial value. In the first iteration, we returned this particular object where we added John to the front end property. So this is something that we returned, that we will return from the first iteration. So in the second iteration, what would be the previous or the accumulator value? It will be this thing that we returned from the first iteration, right? And what would be the current? This second object, this second item. Okay. Similarly, we return this particular object from the second iteration. It's an object with two keys, backend and frontend, and they contain array of one item each, Jane and John. So in the third iteration, this thing that we are returning from the second will become our previous or accumulated value, and the current will be the third item. Right? So let's write an example. In that way, it will make a little bit more sense to you. In fact, let's write a couple of examples. So this is something that we are looking for right now. Okay. So what I'll do is I'll remove this code that is already written, and we will write everything from scratch. So we have developers array, and we are invoking the reduce method on it. Okay. What are the two items that reduce takes? One is the callback function, and another is the initial value. Initial value is usually of the same shape as the end result that we are expecting. Okay. So I'll just copy it and paste it here. So this is our end result. Now this callback function gets access to accumulated value and the current item, right? You'll find all kinds of code online. Some people like to write it as previous item, current item, but I think accumulated value makes much more sense. Now, in every iteration, we will be doing something to the, we'll be returning something which will become the accumulated value of the next iteration. But in the very first iteration, the accumulated value is the initial value itself. Okay. So in the first iteration, it will get just like map function, it will get one item, right? So it will get the first item. And how do we access this first item? We have this item, this second argument to the callback function. And how do we access this initial value? In the first iteration using ACC, accumulator. Okay. So here what we can do is we can check first of all quickly that if item dot department is equal to FE, okay, if it's equal to FE, then we want to push item to the FE, right? So then accumulator dot FE dot push, and we can push item dot first name. Okay, if we want, we can do first and last name as well. Let's do that. Why not? Okay, I'll do first name only. Item dot first only. Okay. Else acc.be dot push item dot last, and finally we need to return ACC. Okay, let's see if it works, and then I'll explain you again the entire thing line by line. I'll just save it and I'll just make a minor change so I can see the result, and we see that we have the desired results. We have two items in the back end, one item in the front end, and we just have one object because we are logging it out here, the reduced array. So what is it doing? Let's see each iteration one by one. So in the very first iteration, what is the item? The item is this thing in the first iteration, right? So I'll just copy it for you. So this is the item in the very first iteration. We know that when we invoke reduce function in an array, each item is called one by one. And for each item, this function is executed. For each item, this function is called. We have access to the current item and an accumulated value. What is the accumulated value in the first iteration? It is the initial value. Accumulated value first iteration में ये initial value होता है. So we know inside this function initial value is this object with two properties, backend and front end, and first item is this. So what we are doing here is इस item में, this object में, ये first item में we are checking कि department कौन सा है. Department अगर front end है तो ये जो accumulator है, ये जो object है जो हमें यहाँ पे मिलता है, उसमें हम FE में push करेंगे फर्स्ट नेम, और अगर नहीं है फ्रंट एंड तो बैक एंड में पुश कर देंगे हम फर्स्ट नेम, लास्ट या फर्स्ट नेम कर देंगे मान लो. ओके, एंड फिर फाइनली हम क्या कर देंगे, वी विल रिटर्न इट. ठीक है, तो जो हम रिटर्न करते हैं दैट बिकम्स द एक्यूमुलेटेड वैल्यू फॉर द सेकेंड इटरेशन. तो जब दूसरा इटरेशन आता है, जब दूसरे आइटम पे जाते हैं हम, तो हमारे पास ये जो हमने लास्ट इटरेशन से रिटर्न किया था ना ऑब्जेक्ट, वो हमारे पास अवेलेबल रहता है. इस तरीके से जब लास्ट वैल्यू थर्ड आइटम में जाने के बाद जब हम रिटर्न करते हैं, सो दैट गेट्स रिटर्न्ड इनटू द रिड्यूस्ड एरे. ओके, नाउ फॉर प्रैक्टिस वन थिंग, you can pause the video and try to make a list of, I'll just save it once. You can make a list of first plus last name. So for example, if I just make a small change, you will see that they only contain the first name, right? I want first and the last name with a space here. How can we do that? Maybe try it, or I'll show you. So what we can do it, we can either use template retrieval or just a plus sign, a space, plus item dot last, and we can do the exact same thing here. And save it, and we'll see that now in the array we have both the first name and the last name. Cool. Another thing, let's do another variation of this problem, so we are all 100% clear about how array.reduce works. So every developer has a couple of commits, right? A couple of git commits. What I want is the total number of commits of all, irrespective of, irrespective of backend or frontend, I need total commits. How do we do that? So the way we can do this is, inside the callback function, I'll simply, remove what we wrote later, or maybe, and the initial value will be just a number which is going to be 0. So now what we'll do is we will return accumulator plus item dot commits, and if I save it, you can see that we get the total commit as the reduce this in this variable. So again, what happens here is we go through each item one by one, all the 3 items. We keep adding the commit count to the accumulator. So it starts from 0, and then we keep getting the accumulated value and we return them. So we get that accumulated value in the next iteration. In that way, once the iteration finishes, we get this, the total commit, right? So these 3 you must master, okay? It's very important. So please practice all the 3 problems that I've suggested, and then here also they have explained it really well. So please go through the explanation. It will make much more sense to you once you have practiced those 3 problems. Okay. Next method, again, reduce right does exactly same, but it starts from the right side. Okay. So in our example, it will start from the last one and then gradually move to the first one. So exact same thing, but starts from the opposite direction. So array.isArray is again a very very important member of array that you should know. So arrays do not form a separate language type. They are based on objects. What does it mean? So if I have an array, so this is an array, right? And I'll simply run it. I'll clear it. And now if I do type of array, then we see that we type of ARR, we get an object. This array is a constructor function which creates an array. Okay, so that's why it shows function. But if we try to see the type of ARR, then it shows object. So how can we know that if object is not enough, we want to make sure that it is an array. How do we do that? For this we have array.isArray. Okay, so if we do array.isArray and we pass in ARR, we'll get true. And if we pass in anything that is not an array, for example an object, we'll get false. Okay, so array.isArray is the way you check if an object is an array. Very important. Very simple, right? Array.isArray. Most methods support this arc. So almost all array methods that call functions like find, filter, map, with a notable exception of sort, accept an optional additional parameter, this arc. Almost all array methods that call functions, right, like find, filter, map, except sort, accept an optional additional parameter called this arc. That parameter is not explained in the sections above because it's rarely used, but for completeness we have covered it. Here is the full syntax of these methods. So inside of array.find, along with the function, we can give this arc. Inside filter, we can use this arc. Inside map, we can use this arc as the optional argument. The value of this arc parameter becomes this for the function. Again, if you have gone through the class on this, you know that this is dynamic in JavaScript. Okay. What will this point to depends entirely on the call site if it's a regular function. And here, these methods allows us to explicitly set this for the function. Okay. So for example, here we use method of army object as a filter, and this arc passes the context. So we have an army object. Okay. We pass in min age, we pass in max age, and can join will return user.age more than equal to this dot min age and user.age less than max age. So only if so this user, whatever this user is passed, right? So it must have a property called age, and if we check that age is within the range, then we return true or false depending on both the conditions need to be true. Okay, so again, an object, one property is min age, another property is max age, and a method is can join. Users is a simple object. Okay, users is a simple array of objects. Okay, and each users is an array of object, and it contains a lot of users. Okay, and each object just contains age. Now we are calling and now what we are doing is we are calling army.canJoin inside the filter. So users is the array, we are filtering that array, and what is the callback function? Army.canJoin. Okay, and what, so this can join uses this keyword, right? This dot min age and this dot max age, etc. Right? And user dot age obviously we have because we are looping through the users. So what is going to be the value of this? I think it will make a little bit more sense if we just copy it. If we just copy it, and I'll show you. I think there's a better way to copy it. This is open in Sandbox. Just simply copy it. Command C, and I'll paste it here. Command V. Clear it. Now, just a simple recap. I'll comment out these things for now. Just let's quickly revise the filter method. So let filtered users is equal to users dot filter. Okay, it all obviously takes in a callback function, and depending on whether the callback function returns a truthy value or falsy value, that particular item will either be included in the new array or not included in the new array. So if I return item dot age, if I return item dot age more than 25, okay, and then we console.log the filtered users, what will we get? We will get just one item, right? Which is age 30, because only age 30 is greater than 25, right? So we are clear with the filter method at least, right? Now let's move one step ahead. So this function, we want to use something like, we pass in user. So I'll name it user so that it makes a little bit more sense to you. And so that's why we'll have to check with user.age. And then if I run it, I get the exact same response and everything is working as expected. So whatever parameter I am passing here, that is each item. Is this much clear? Whatever value or variable I set here, that is each item, right? Inside the callback function, that becomes each item. So if it's user, so we get each user one by one. Okay. So if we look at this particular callback method, user is always available to us because we are passing that to the callback function. Okay, again, if this is confusing you, nothing is stopping us from making it an external function. Na? So for example, if I cut it, let fn is equal to something, any function, and I can pass function here, right? I can pass function here, right? Making sense? So it's equivalent to, we have just written this inside it. So here user.age will be each user in every iteration, and depending on the value of the age, it will return either true or false. Are we clear about here so far? Good. Now let me get rid of this and let us look at the example that was shared in the. So here again, this is a new array, variable to store a new array. We are doing the same thing, user.filter, but in the callback function we are passing in army.canJoin. So we are passing in army.canJoin, this particular function we are passing in. Now this particular function gets each user one by one, and it gets user.age for each iteration. But what will this point to here? Think about this. So if I just console log here, console.log this, and I'll just put in this here so it's very, very clear to you. If I do this and I save, and now if I run it, here this is pointing to through this entire object, right? This entire object, we can see that min, max and can join, right? So this is passing to the entire, this is referencing to the entire thing. Why is it referencing to the entire object? Because we have passed in this arg as the second argument. If I get rid of it, and now I execute it, this points to window. Why? Why do this point to window? Because inside the callback function, we are, so here it's running as, because this particular function, it runs as a standalone function. Okay, just think that we are writing this inside here. We have just copied it and we have just pasted it here. So it's running as a standalone function, and when a function is invoked, without we explicitly or implicitly binding this always points to the global object. In browser it's window. So this is basically running as a standalone function. So this, within this function, standalone function, will always point to the window object. If you have not seen the tutorial for this keyword, please do see it. Okay, it's very useful. And to solve this problem, we have this next argument, inside which we can pass the context of this. So we can pass in army here, we can pass in army here, and now everything will work as expected. Okay, so this inside the callback function will point to what we have pointed here. Yeah, please go through the entire summary, friends. This is a very nice way to revise everything. And more than the summary, okay, more than the summary, you have a lot of tasks here. Make sure to complete all of them. Okay, these are very important tasks, and these will definitely, help you a lot to master these techniques.